So today we're going to be doing a book talk on A Little Life. I read this the first week of April. I just finished it a few days ago. It's still pretty fresh in my mind. And it's a very unpopular opinion. I gave this book 1 star. And it was like between 1 and 2. And at the end of the day, the amount of like frustration and like I just loathed this book. I regret reading it. I wish I hadn't, but once I got into it, I felt like I needed to know everything that was in there so that I could do this, so that I could talk about it, because I have a lot of thoughts. Getting into this, so for the spoiler-free part, which the beginning of these videos always are, spoiler-free. So for the spoiler-free portion, it's going to be pretty short, because honestly, I don't really feel like the need to build this up a lot, because I don't recommend it at all. But that being said, if you are interested in reading it, it's essentially just a story following the lives of 4 characters of this friend group. And you follow them from, I believe most of them are in their early 20s, but one is in like their late teens when they first meet. And then you follow them all the way through to their 50s. And you just get this whole big like life story. There really is no plot. That there isn't really like, there's no point to the book, I guess, is how I feel. I feel like it's very pointless. It left me feeling very helpless and very hopeless and very frustrated. And it's not necessarily that I don't think the author intended to do that. I think she probably did. But I don't understand, I guess, the point of having a book that leaves you feeling that incredibly broken. And not, like, in a good way. Like, there are books that have broken my heart. Salt to the Sea, The Book Thief, there's a theme here, World War II, historical fiction. But there are other books, Bridge of Clay. There are books that completely broke my heart. But I felt like there was a purpose to the book. There was a point to the book. There was still hope within these books. And this book contained no hope. Like, none. At all. Pretty much anywhere. If you guys don't want to know trigger warnings or anything like that, then maybe click away now. So in this book, and I mentioned this in a vlog before, so if you saw that, you already know this, but there is self-harm, suicide, suicide attempts, child loss, child abuse, sexual abuse to both an adult and child, and child trafficking. So, and also kidnapping. But I guess that kind of goes along with all the rest. But there is a lot of stuff all in here. A lot of it. And it's very detailed, and it's very disgusting to read, and it's awful. So if you feel like that is something that you don't want to get into, maybe don't read this book, because it is very detailed. Anyway, that is, I know that's bad. That's all I've got for the spoiler free, because I have a lot of thoughts and I don't know how to process them, and I've been like choking on this book for the last few days, and I really just want to get my thoughts out and then like throw it away. I won't actually throw it. Why is it that like, okay, this book, I have to say, best, most floppy, delicious to hold book in the world, and I absolutely hated it. It was like, ugh. The most joyful holding reading experience, the worst actual reading experience. Anyway, I'm just gonna get right into the spoilers now, so if you don't want to see spoilers, click away. If you don't plan on reading this book, then feel free to keep watching. So, I guess the only pro, really, that I have for the book is like the first 100 pages. Like this little chunk here is where you first meet the 4 characters, JB, Jude, Willem, and Malcolm. You meet these 4 characters. I did find myself stumbling, and I couldn't figure out at first why, but then all of these little tabs at the top kind of show, and then I stopped doing it. They kind of show the issue that I had, and so a lot of times, and I said this in like a vlog, there were points where like someone would speak, and then right below it would say he, and it would, you didn't know if it was like referring, or I couldn't figure out if it was referring to the person who just spoke or the person whose perspective we were getting, because throughout these paragraphs, the he could refer to either party in the conversation. And I felt like that was really pulling me out of the story, and I was having a very hard time keeping people straight, like keeping the characters straight in my head, just trying to figure out who was who. And I ended up in the back here writing notes on each character, each character's family situation, just like notes to keep track of everyone until I kind of had a feel for them. But in the beginning of the book, I was pretty excited. Like the first vlog that I showed this in, I was like, I just read the first 100 pages. I'm happy. I want to keep going. I want to see where these people go. I was very intrigued. Not necessarily in love with these characters, but very intrigued. And Jude, I was particularly curious about. I was pretty sure the book was going to kind of revolve around him as like a main character. And it did. And there was a part, there was a couple parts that I liked. Like in the very beginning, it's talking about the four of them and how like they would position themselves around Jude because he had issues with his legs. And I just thought that was so sweet that they would kind of subconsciously care for their friend like that. And I really liked how their friendship was developing. That I liked. I thought that was really sweet. And then there's a part where Willem and JB are hanging out, and Willem kind of says like, JB is the one person in this group that I can be really silly around. I feel like I can just be like extra goofy and stuff like that. And so in the beginning, I was pretty like captured with these characters, and I wanted to see where they went. And honestly, they went in a really like kind of foul direction. I felt like, I'm going to start with JB because I honestly feel like he was sort of a useless character. So JB is this artist. He is kind of a narcissist, and as he goes on through, he's the one person in the group where he feels like he is supposed to succeed. He really thinks he deserves all of this fame and all of this like extravagance. And he's almost jealous of his friends being successful before he is, or that he'll think like that they don't necessarily deserve it, or not, or I guess like kind of like that they haven't earned it or something. Like it was like he was frustrated that his friends were successful in their careers, and he was like the last one to come. So by the time he got successful, he was almost kind of like, yeah, this should have happened earlier. Like he wasn't really grateful for it. He just felt like he deserved it. And that kind of irritated me. He was very jealous. He was jealous of like Willem and Jude's relationship. And then he went through that, like I feel like the author kind of used, I don't know how to explain it, like almost him as like kind of a convenience, I guess. I don't know. He just seemed very much like he didn't have to be there. He wasn't that important of a character to me. And then when he went through that thing where he became a drug addict for a while, and then the intervention happened and him and Jude like essentially blew up the entire friend group, I kind of thought that was stupid because they were so, not old in the sense of like, oh, they were senior citizens, but they're old enough that like I couldn't imagine being like, I'm almost 29. By the time this goes up, I might be 29. But if I'm my age and I'm performing an intervention on someone and they say something hurtful, I don't expect to take that to heart. Like if someone turns around and says something that I know they're saying it just to hurt me, I feel like I wouldn't necessarily take offense to that. Because they're in the middle, like they're a drug addict, they're in the middle of feeling so attacked, and so they're turning that on you. And maybe it's because when I was younger and I was a much less kind person in high school, I would turn my anger on other people and I would say things that were meant to hurt, but not that I meant, if that makes sense. And like, that's like, whew, that's spilling some tea on myself there. But I did go through a phase where I was unhappy and I didn't even realize that I was unhappy until I looked back on this time in my life. But I was clearly going through something and I was taking my anger and my rage and my sadness out on other people to like kind of deflect things off of myself. And so I feel like that is exactly what JB did. He said something that he knew would be absolutely horrible to hurt feelings, and then it blew up the whole group. And as adults, you'd think that they would know that, or at least Willem would know that, or Malcolm would know that. Like, it's just, to me, it seemed stupid, and it seemed like they just needed another point for Jude to be sad about. And then I guess I'm going to go on to Malcolm, because he's the other character who really is barely in the book. He's just an architect. He's there to say, yeah, I love you guys together, yeah, I love our friends, yeah, whatever. But he really doesn't have a lot of personality. He doesn't really do a lot. He is just there when they need renovations and to say nice things. Malcolm is very, like, I feel like this friend group was almost made for the sake of the accident at the end of the book. Like, they gave Jude some friends so that his life could be terrible, and then he would have like a few years where it was sort of less terrible, even though he tormented himself, and then they had to kill everyone he loves except for Harold, and then it was just like a giant device to the end of the book. Like, to me, it just, so much of this book seemed really pointless. I guess my biggest issue with the book is between Jude and Willem, because they are the two biggest characters. Honestly, Willem, at first I did like him because he seemed like this really sweet person, and he never stopped being like that, but he also seemed like, again, he was just another thing. Like, he was just kind of another person. The book was mostly about Jude. Let's be real, the story is pretty much revolving around Jude. So, getting into Jude, I don't know what to say. So, okay, with Jude, when you first start reading about his past, because obviously you only get glimpses throughout the book here and there, like every so often it'll go back in time, and it will reveal a little more, and it will reveal a little more, and it will reveal a little more, and honestly, the things that happen to him are sickening, and reading those scenes was absolutely sickening. I am not saying that the writer doesn't have talent. Obviously, I found some issues with the actual writing that I didn't prefer, or that were just not translating well with my mind, like reading-wise, but she's definitely talented. I have no doubt that she intended this book to make you feel like helpless and hopeless and sad. I don't think she's untalented. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I gave the book 1 star about. The 1 star came from just how much I hated this book. I almost gave it 2, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I feel like now that I'm on camera, I never write notes, but I feel like I should have written something formal down to follow. But Jude is a heartbreaking character. He just is. He is heartbreaking, but I didn't find myself feeling like I needed to cry in this book. I felt like my mind was screaming. The whole time I was reading this, my mind was screaming, just speak up. Please just say something. Like, I'm screaming in my mind because I just want Jude to say something. And so throughout the book, you learn a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and all these things that he's penning up inside, and he won't say them and he won't let them out. And it's like, I feel so mad and frustrated. And I'm not angry at him for having mental illness or anything like that. Like, it's not like I'm going to try not to say empathy a million times in this video, but I don't want people to think, oh, she's just a jerk who has no empathy for something that she doesn't deal with or understand. I definitely have empathy, and I understand the practicality of just doing it is easier said than done. That I understand, so hopefully I don't have to keep reiterating that point. But that being said, you can only be helped if you want to help yourself. And so as you find out more and more things unfold, it got to the point where I was kind of like, of course that also happened. Of course that also, like, it just got like, there's no way that every single thing in this story happened to one person. Things just didn't make sense. And then the fact that, like, when he talks about when he's a kid, I think he's 9 or 10 when Brother Luke first takes him, and he talks about a computer. So if he's 9 or 10 and Brother Luke has a computer that he can take with him, so I'm assuming it's a laptop, that has to be at least, early 2000s? Like, there's no real time frame for this book. Nothing really happens. You don't really know what year it's supposed to be. I feel like it ends sort of in the future, but it's all set now. It's very confusing. But he talks about how Brother Luke has this computer that he takes with him, etc., etc. So they have to be in a certain, it's not like it's set in like the 40s when people didn't talk about stuff. So he goes away with Brother Luke, and all this bad stuff happens, and he gets, well, I mean, first it starts out in the monastery. Let's go back. He gets ditched as a baby, abused by every single priest, which, I get it, it's like a stereotype of like the Catholic Church that priests are always dirty, but I felt like this book, side tangent, gave gay people a very bad light. And I don't typically read, sorry, that cut off at a really weird time. I don't typically read books with gay romance in them because it's just not my cup of tea, but I'm not going to drop a star rating or anything like that because the romance in that sense wasn't my thing. It could still be good, it's just, it might not be my thing. That's totally fine. But with this book, I feel like it painted every single man as, like, gay and a predator, and, like, one does not equate to the other, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I feel like it painted that whole kind of community in a bad light. Some people think it's very, like, pro, but I feel like they made them all seem very dirty, except for the select few in the story, like the main characters. Getting into the story, so essentially dumped as a baby, molested at a monastery, sex trafficked. The prostitution thing actually kind of makes sense in a way because that's all he knows, but then he ends up getting kidnapped by Dr. Trailer and finding out he's a psychiatrist, so then I was just like, oh, of course that's why he doesn't want to see a psychiatrist, because he was abused by the church, the public, the hospitals didn't help him when he was beaten half to death for running away from the boys' home, and then he gets kidnapped by a psychiatrist. Of course, of all things, he gets kidnapped by a psychiatrist. And he keeps all this in, and throughout all this time, so 30, 40 years, he is just hacking himself to pieces. And there are pages and pages and pages and pages where it's explained over and over and over. And honestly, the way he talks about cutting himself it sounds the same as like somebody who can't stop shooting up with meth. He uses it as a release. He's using it, sorry, there's like a hair on my face. He's using it as a sense of escape. And then when he finally does attempt suicide in a very, very, oh my goodness, I feel like that scene in particular, I feel very much the same about that scene as the very end of 13 Reasons Why. And I feel like it romanticizes and almost kind of glamorizes that scene. She writes it, I have to say, in a very beautiful way, but that to me is also very dangerous, to write something that is so final in such an elegant way. And I feel like and I don't know what it would feel like to be there because I've never felt like that, but I feel like if I was in that frame of mind where I felt like I needed to end my life, reading something like this would be comforting in a bad way, in a dangerous way, especially in the end when he succeeds and everything is final, and it's just, to me, it seems very hopeless, and it seems very much like whatever you put your mind to is what you will achieve. And he put his mind to not telling anyone, really. I mean, eventually he did open up to Willem over time. He did let some of it out, but Willem is not a psychiatrist, and he became less of a romantic partner, in fact, not a romantic partner at all, and just his caretaker. And so it was this, to me, the relationship was kind of disgusting, because I don't think it's fair to have to be in a relationship on the basis of, if you leave, this person will kill themselves. That is not romantic. That's disgusting. That's sad. That's horrible. There is no reason, or there is, like, how do I explain this? Like, there's no way you should be able to expect another person to keep you alive. And I don't even think that Jude really cared about keeping himself alive. But for Willem, he felt like he needed to be there or else Jude would die. And that is not a healthy relationship. That's not a healthy friendship. That is not healthy for either party involved. And then the whole thing where Jude doesn't tell his best friend in the entire world. Yet another thing, more recent, but another thing. He goes through that period of time where he's dating Caleb and gets beaten half to death and raped. And it's, oh man, it was awful to read. But I felt like the book was just, it was so awful. And I loathed Caleb. I felt for Jude. It wasn't like I didn't feel empathy for the characters, like I said. It wasn't that I didn't feel sad. I felt like it was just written purely to hurt, and there was no purpose for it. There was no meaning. It was just pointless. It was just really pointless. And so you find out, you read all this stuff about Caleb and him, and then he doesn't tell anyone. Again, he just internalizes it, but he gets so much worse. And then Willem, out of nowhere, this is like the most convenient relationship. Like, to me, it just doesn't, to me, there was no lead up to it. To me, they were really good friends, or at least Willem was a really good friend to Jude. Not that Jude was a bad friend, but the relationship was unbalanced. I would have a very hard time being in a relationship where I didn't know, like, my best friend's deepest, darkest secrets. I couldn't imagine doing that. And obviously he learned more once they were in the relationship, but then he got to the point internally where Willem didn't know if he wanted to know. And I'm like, no, you can't stop now. And he didn't. But that relationship just seemed, all of a sudden, Willem was like, well, the last time I left, he tried to commit suicide, so I think I might be in love with him. And then he just decided that they should be together. And then Jude goes through this entire internalization of, honestly, is Jude even gay? I don't think he knew. I don't think he had any idea. Willem clearly wasn't gay. He liked Jude, but I think he liked Jude as a friend, and he didn't care who he slept with. It was just one of those kinds of a thing, and of course my dog is barking. He better stop that. But it was just, like, to me, the relationship seemed so convenient, and then for 4 years, Jude doesn't tell him that he hates having sex. Jude doesn't tell him. Can you imagine how you would feel if you were sleeping with someone that you apparently loved, and then after 4 years they said, look, every single time we have sex, it feels the same as when I used to be raped? Like, could you imagine, like, at that point, like, not that I don't feel bad for Jude, but, and I get it, he was so afraid of losing this person in his life that he went through it, but, like, can you imagine being the other person? Because I couldn't imagine being the person who felt like an abuser even though you did nothing wrong. Like, you would feel so guilty and awful for hurting this person that you care about. It was just so awful to read that. And then they stayed together, but, and again, another reason for why this romance sucks, but they stay together, but, you know, Willem gets his side pieces because he needs to get his rocks off because Jude has no sex drive, and to me, that's not a good relationship. And then, I did mark this because I wanted to talk about it. There's a part where Willem talks about you have to pick 3 qualities, and maybe that's all you get in a relationship. And so he says that for his relationship, he picked friendship. And he says, like, you take all the things you want from a person: sexual chemistry, good conversation, financial support, intellectual capability, niceness, loyalty, and you get to pick 3 things. That is not a healthy relationship. That's not. And I know that for a fact because Jared is all of those things and so much more. And maybe people will say, well, you're just lucky. But Jared is all of those things and so much more. He is wonderful. When I read that part, it made me so mad that people think this is such a beautiful relationship when he thinks that you have to settle for 3 qualities that you get in another person. Like, no, you do not. And people who read this and they romanticize that and they end up in these relationships that probably kind of suck because they think you can only have 3 qualities and then the rest you have to get somewhere else. I'm not saying you don't need other friends and you can't have other friends and you can't have, like, other people around you, but you shouldn't need to look outside of your relationship or outside of your marriage to feel, like, stability. At least that's what I think. But I felt like this relationship was awful. And then, by the time the car accident happened, I didn't even care anymore because I just felt so disconnected with the story. I didn't feel like I connected with these characters at all. I mean, they're all in their 30s and then 40s and eventually 50s. One of them gets married. 2 of them are in a awkward relationship that sucks, and then JB is off doing his whatever, I don't know, they barely mention him, kind of a thing. And of course, then, once the car accident happens, and then Jude gets this weird thing where he's mad at JB for being the one that didn't die, like, now who's the bad guy? Like, that was a sucky thing to do. You have one friend left in the world, and you just axe him because he didn't die instead of your boyfriend. And I get it. I understand grief. I still understand. I understand lashing out. I do. But to me, that was just another thing that had to happen, and the car accident just was the last straw. And as soon as it happened, I literally just started skimming pages because I didn't even care about the last 100 pages because I knew that we were just going to find out that Jude was dead, and I think that happens in, what, the last 10 pages or something, or the last page, I don't know. But I'm reading it, and I'm just like, I don't even care anymore. I barely cared in the, like, at some point, I just stopped caring because I knew that the ending was going to end as hopeless as everything began. I just don't see the point in this book. I really don't. And I mean, maybe the point was to show people like what mental illness looks like or something like that. But to me, it just makes it so hopeless. Like, it makes it, like, it's like, well, that's how he chose to be, and like, there was, I don't know, it made me feel hopeless as a person who's on the outside, the person who wants to help, because if I had a friend who was suffering, honestly, I don't think if they said, look, if you tell anyone about what I told you, I'll stop talking to you. That's manipulative. That's dangerous, and you're just enabling the entire problem and the entire situation over and over and over. The people in this book enabled him the way that it'd be like giving a drug addict money. Like, I wouldn't do that. I would do at that point, I don't think I would even care about the friendship if I thought it meant the person would lose their life regardless. And it was just, it was heartbreaking. It was. It definitely was. But I don't think this book is this beautiful work of art that other people really think it is. And, I don't know if there's anything else I have to say, really. I mean, I'm sure I could go on for ages and ages and ages. I feel like I already have. But I just feel very alone in thinking this, but I also feel like it's kind of, you know how some books just get so hyped up that it's like, you can't not love it, and so you have to love it, and you kind of have this, like, veil over your eyes where you just, like, and I'm not saying that people don't genuinely like it and can't have their own feelings. Obviously they can. Obviously you guys can. But I'm just curious, is there anyone else out there who feels the way I did? Comment down below. Also, if you have a different opinion, that's okay. I'm totally fine with that. If you want to say, look, I thought it was good because of this, start a conversation down below. I would love to have a, you know, friendly, polite conversation, of course, with anybody who wants to talk about this. I'm very curious about other views, but I'm also curious to see if there's anyone else who kind of feels the way I do. I know, I think the channel name is Mercy's Bookish Musings, has a video, and she also didn't like this book. I haven't watched hers yet because I didn't want to, like, have my brain filled with someone else's words, so I wanted to get this out, and then literally after this is done, I'm gonna go and watch that video and see what she has to say, because I'm very curious about other people's opinions who didn't necessarily love this book like everyone else did. Anyway, I'm gonna end this here because I have rambled on and babbled on for ages, and I just want to take this book and I want to hide it away, and I don't even think I want to put it on my shelf. It's one of those books where I literally feel like if I was to unhaul it, I kind of just want to throw it in the campfire because I feel like it could be dangerous in the wrong hands, and I feel like I need to protect people from it. And that's all I got. Anyway, I will talk to you all next time. Thank you so much for watching if you watched all the way to the end, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!